Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us. Yesterday, Northeast Ohio voters headed to the polls to exercise their civic rights to cast their ballots. To share a few key results, Justin Bibb, the incumbent mayor of Cleveland, handily won and will serve a second term. And school levies in Elyria, Parma, and Streetsboro failed once again, while levies in Garfield Heights and Lorain passed. Meanwhile, Cleveland City Council's newly drawn ward representatives were decided. New mayors were voted into office in East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights as well. Today, we'll kick off the show talking to a few winners from yesterday. We'll also talk school levies and school board races with our education reporter, Connor Morris. And then finally, we will look ahead to some of the political stories we'll be keeping an eye on for the next year, including Ohio's new congressional maps. Now, if you would like to join the conversation, please give us a call. That number is 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org or message us on Instagram. We are at The Sound of Ideas. We'll first welcome in Jim Petras. Jim is the newly elected mayor of Cleveland Heights. Jim, congratulations. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, Jim, you were serving as a council member. Now, why did you decide to run for mayor as the Cleveland Heights area was dealing with the recall of former mayor Khalil Sarin?
I love being on Cleveland Heights City Council. Presidential politics are very exciting, but at the local level, you have a bigger impact. And so I love serving on this body. But the reality is that City Council can pass laws all day long, but ultimately it's the mayor who's responsible for getting things done. So if you're unhappy that the roads aren't getting repaired or something else in the city isn't getting done, you need to run to become mayor. And so that was really at the heart of my motivation.
Now, we can't look ahead to the future without taking a moment to recognize what's happened in the past. And we know that Sarin was ousted in mayor as mayor in September in a recall vote. This was after his wife was accused of making anti-Semitic and homophobic comments while serving as a de facto representative for the mayor. So from your perspective, how does the office of mayor regain the trust with the people moving forward?
I think that it's going to take some time, but I think that being present in the community, allowing people to see you in the community, and working hard to deliver results for folks will hopefully, over time, begin to rebuild trust.
Now, the position of mayor for Cleveland Heights didn't exist before Sarin took office in 2022. So how do you see the position evolving moving forward as you take office at the beginning of the new year?
The reality is that the position is going to stay pretty similar. At the end of the day, the mayor is the chief executive for the city. And like I said earlier, they're the person who's responsible for ultimately getting things done in the city.
And what did you see in your time there? You know, you were on council in terms of bringing that position into the city. How did having that mayor kind of change things? Was it able to make things more effective? What did you see?
Well, I think that under our previous form of government, where the administration was led by a city manager, if folks in the city were not happy with the work that the city manager was doing, you need to get a majority of city council members who are willing to fire that person. And that could be difficult. It could take multiple election cycles before you get a city council that's willing to make that decision. And so by having a directly elected mayor, I think that Cleveland Heights is able to better ensure that things are getting done throughout the city.
Coming from city council, what's your outlook on your ability to work together with city council as the new mayor beginning in 2026?
I look forward to sitting down with each of the council members and understanding what their goals are. The reality is that every elected official runs for a reason, and so I want to understand their reasons for running and what they hope to achieve so that we could collectively put together a plan for moving our city forward.
Let's talk about the residents now and maybe some conversations that you've had opportunities to have with them. What have you heard from the residents? What did they want you to tackle when you take on the office of mayor?
I think, firstly, people are just exhausted and want to return to a sense of normalcy. And so I think that folks are ready to turn the page and start a new chapter. We knocked on thousands of doors throughout this campaign, and we are consistently hearing that people are really interested in us focusing on our core city services. So, for example, increasing road resurfacing and pothole repair, and a number of other things like leaf pickup and modernizing some of our city facilities, upgrading our parks, pools, and our community center. And so that's what I look forward to focusing on.
Now, you'll be meeting with the current interim mayor soon. That's Tony Kuda, to plan out your transition into office. So what is highest on your list to talk with him about?
Well, I look forward to sitting down with him and staff members and better understanding the current state of things at City Hall. It's important that we have a solid understanding of what's going on right now so that we can then create a plan for how we get to our goals.
And let me ask you, Jim, as you saw the results rolling in, what did that feel like when you learned that you would be taking on the office of mayor in Cleveland Heights?
Well, I was very grateful to the residents for their support. No individual can do this alone. It takes a team. There are so many people who helped us throughout this campaign, who knocked on doors, made phone calls, put up yard signs. So I'm very grateful for all the hard work that so many people put into the campaign. It really was a team effort, and I was just very grateful that all of that hard work paid off.
All right, Jim Petras, the mayor-elect for Cleveland Heights, thank you very much for joining us here on The Sound of Ideas. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You as well. Let's now welcome Austin Davis. He is the winner of the contest to represent Ward 7 on Cleveland City Council at a time when the wards were redrawn, so shrinking the council to 15 members in total. Austin, congratulations. Thank you for calling in today.
Stephanie, thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Now, Austin, both you and your opponent in the race, Mohammed Faraj, had never been elected to office. So why is it that you think Cleveland City Council needs a fresh perspective right now?
I think that the community here in the near west side, which is the near Ward 7, Gordon Square, George Shoreway, Ohio City, Tremont, the Flats, is a special place, and it needs a particular kind of representation. There's no other ward like it, with our transit access, our walkability, the market forces that are impacting our housing market locally, and all the way to the social service agencies that call this place home for so long. It takes a special kind of representation to make it all work. And I was really proud and to step up and really proud of the results we had last night, of the vote of confidence for that kind of vision.
Now, this is your first elected position, but you're not necessarily new to politics. You did work with Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb as an advisor during his first term. So how do you think that relationship there will play into your time as a council member?
I like to tell folks, hey, I've been in City Hall before. I know where the bathrooms are. I can hit the ground running. Which is true. I think there's always a learning curve, no matter what new job you have. There's a huge learning curve, especially in these positions, which are complicated, tumultuous at times. But mine will be shorter, and I look forward to being able to show up in City Hall, knowing where the files are, knowing who to talk to when services miss a step, and knowing how to push the bounds of what's possible, but also focus on exactly what we can do in this community.
There's something to be said for knowing who to call on the phone directory. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Now, Austin, the city's west side has been hit recently with car break-ins. Dozens of car windows were smashed on Detroit Avenue. That was just a few weekends ago. So how do you want to work with the Cleveland administration and police to try and stop break-ins like that from happening?
It's one of the biggest challenges. Car break-ins have been an epidemic recently, but let's also reflect that street takeovers were a huge problem a couple of years ago. I like to tell folks, well, I don't enjoy this part, but I live near the 490 exit in Tremont, and I've seen a drive-by shooting from my living room window, with a car shooting up an Airbnb party that got out of control across the street. It's just, there's a lot of this kind of disorder in our community. It takes an all-of-the-above approach to tackle it. I hope to continue to support the police, ensuring that they're well-resourced, well-funded, well-trained staff to crack down on this kind of stuff, and that they have the tools they need. Because these are the kind of issues that will drive people, individuals, and families out of this community. They don't have to live like this, and they shouldn't.
Now, you mentioned that experience that you had living in the Tremont neighborhood. Ward 7 is made up of a diverse group of Clevelanders. There are pockets in Ohio City and Tremont with very high income earners, and those areas are also around the corner from people who are living closer to the federal poverty level. So how do you plan to balance those interests of the people in Ward 7 as you represent them?
It is an interesting ward. As I understand it, has the second highest number of folks in public housing, but also has the highest median income level of any ward across the city of Cleveland. But I'll say that these are our neighbors. And where I live, and I think this is true for much of the near west side, my folks who live behind me are in CMHA scatter site housing. Down the block is an affordable housing, LIHTC, mixed income complex. across the street is a beautiful luxury apartment complex, the 130 units. We are all in this together. And the issues that, in fact, impact one of us, impact all of us, whether it's unsafe drivers, whether it's rising housing costs, whether it's a street that forgot to get plowed. We live on that same street together. So my goal is to elevate all of our needs together, continue to be accessible as much as possible, and focus on making sure the city delivers for every single family that lives in this community.
The Ward 7, it's probably closest to what was Council Member Kerry McCormick's ward. Now, he left City Council in October for a new job. Lauren Welch is serving the term before you take over at the beginning of the year. So I'm wondering, are you taking any notes, good, bad, neutral, anything you're taking in from what you know from that service from McCormick and Welch into the work that you'll do when you start your term?
Absolutely. I'm excited to go to Interim Council Member Welch's safety meeting, public safety meeting this evening at Urban Community School. Kerry McCormick led on a lot of really important issues. The Complete and Green Streets Ordinance, I like to point out, was one of his brainchilds that really pushed forward some walkability initiatives in this community. I hope to build on the Airbnb legislation that he pushed for a couple of years and land that plane early next year. We need to regulate these Airbnbs. I'll say, I mean, there's also maybe a third of this ward was in Councilmember Jenny Spencer's territory. And boy, I mean, she's a powerhouse as well. She's been working on a long transition memo, which I look forward to reading in depth when she has a chance.
And I'll ask you now, this will be your first elected office. Nikki Hudson won her race in Ward 11, also a first-timer. Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb, a second-timer now, winning the mayoral election. What's the feeling like? Is there excitement in city government with these relatively new, young, fresh faces?
I think it's exciting. This is part of what makes it so good to be a Clevelander these days. Is folks are really engaged and invested in their local government. I mean, what a miracle and a blessing to have folks, the community, our neighbors, tuned in and trying to make sure that our government continues to deliver the services it needs to. Especially when you look at how toxic, caustic, terrible our state politics have been, and certainly our federal politics. They know that where they can really make a difference is in their backyard. And I don't know, the energy that we've experienced on the trail and at backyards and block party, block club, it's been really humbling. And that's what I'll emphasize too, is it was exciting to work in City Hall under a new mayor, but as a candidate, boy, my name happens to be Austin Davis, but the brand of Austin Davis for Ward 7 had a lot of people working behind it, and I'm so grateful for all their help.
We have a call now from Chris in Ohio City. Chris, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi. I was listening to soon-to-be Councilor Davis speak about his neighbors being tuned in and really being jazzed up. But, I've been thinking, we've seen decades of lowering voter participation. So I'm wondering how Councilor Davis will increase voter participation, voter registration. How is he going to get people to participate?
Thank you for the question, Chris. Councilor-elect Davis, the question is, how will you increase voter participation in Ward 7?
It's a really key question. Thank you, Chris. On one hand, I take a little solace in that the race Mohammed and I just had was, I think, really productive for the community. It was contested but not contentious. Ideas and personalities and experience were just discussed on their own terms. And as far as I can tell, the Ward 7 council race had the most number of city council votes cast. This may have been the highest turnout ward across the city. I'm really proud of that. Doesn't mean that we can slow down, though. My plan is to, as much as I can, encourage folks to vote, to get engaged, to be accessible, to reach them where they're at, doors, block parties, etc. And I'll just say, this is a citywide problem and a national problem. If someone had an easy answer, I think we'd already have it.
One more question for you, Austin, before we let you go. The City Council for Cleveland is shrinking now to 5 representatives. Do you see that having an impact for the residents of Cleveland?
It's the change in numbers and the change in maps will change who folks communicate with when they need services, when those services aren't, when they miss a step. But I think, there's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone's going to be, we're all in this together, and my goal is to be responsive to everybody from, 73rd Street to the Industrial Valley and West 3rd. It's just that's how he is.
All right. Thank you very much, Austin Davis, who will be representing Ward 7 in the new year for the City of Cleveland Council. Thank you very much for calling in today, Austin.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, now let's welcome Sandra Morgan, who won the contest to be the next mayor of the City of East Cleveland. Sandra, congratulations. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm excited.
Thank you very much for calling in. We appreciate it. I know people are looking forward to hearing from you for sure. Now, you previously served as interim mayor in East Cleveland by appointment back in February. Now you're returning for the full 4-year term that will start in January. So is there work that you started last year that you're excited to continue when you take office again?
As a matter of fact, there is. When I came into office, I was appointed on February 28th, and I took office. I was sworn in on March 3rd. And there were a number of projects that were in progress, many of them infrastructure related, replacing old water pipes, sewer pipes, in some cases gas lines, and then repaving the roads. And those were projects that are important to the city of East Cleveland, and that demand good stewardship and review at all times. And they were stalled a couple of times during the Shabazz administration, and I'm looking forward to just moving those projects forward and making sure that our infrastructure is sound. I also am interested in restructuring City Hall a lot more now, creating those roles in City Hall that are relevant to a modern municipality, and restructuring it so that, some of the old jobs that really are kind of irrelevant are sunsetted.
And I want to remind people we are talking with several of the winners from last night's general election. If you want to take part in the conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. Now, Sandra, I'll ask you, there was some very public infighting between folks at the top in East Cleveland, even courts getting involved over who the rightful mayor was leading up to this election. So how do you hope to move past those disagreements and govern effectively?
Well, this election was an overwhelming, in my opinion, mandate for who the mayor is and the term that they will serve. So, there was a lot of confusion over who will be the interim mayor, who will serve after, Mayor King, former Mayor King, had his troubles, and it sort of resolved itself with this election. So now. I've been elected. I'm the mayor-elect, and I will go into office as would any other elected official. And we'll be able to get past it, I think, because the people are ready to get past it. The citizens here in East Cleveland are ready to move forward and to move towards progress and to leave the bickering behind. And I plan to do that.
And you talk about an overwhelming mandate. You did win by 84%. So I think objectively we can say that's true, that sounds like a pretty solid mandate there to move forward in East Cleveland with Sandra Morgan. So I'll ask you now, East Cleveland has had to move past corruption issues. You talk about moving past the things from the past, and that was with former Mayor Brandon King, who was sentenced to 3 years probation earlier this year. So how have you gone about up until this point? And will you continue earning the trust of East Clevelanders and restoring faith in the office of mayor?
Well, I think the simplest thing is to do the right thing within the city of East Cleveland and to share what's happening, to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, quite honestly, but to always tell the truth and to be transparent with the citizens. One of the things that I did when I was interim mayor was I held monthly town hall meetings. And those town hall meetings were great because it allowed people to ask questions. They were typically themed around, one thing or another, whether it was summer construction, I called it Summer in the City, and it was centered around construction in the city and demolition, construction, and road work. And people could ask questions about anything they wanted, but to explain these processes, where the money was coming from, how the money was being spent, just to be transparent and let people know at all times what is going on in the city. And I think that that's going to go a long way in dispelling a lot of rumors and hearsay, but also in helping our citizens feel more comfortable with what's happening at City Hall.
Speaking of what's to come in the city of East Cleveland, officials in East Cleveland have been looking at options to fight against state control of the finances of the city. You actually support this move to place the city in receivership. So what does that mean for the city of East Cleveland, and why are you in support of this plan?
Well, what it means for the city of East Cleveland is that finally, after 30 years of financial difficulties, we will be able to have the state come in. They will bring in, crackerjack people to help us figure out what has happened over the past several years with our finances, to file the appropriate papers and documents and reports that we need to get into the state of Ohio, and then build some creative and constructive ways to generate income for our city and to get out of receivership. I mean, the goal of being in receivership is to open up the books, to lay everything bare, again, being transparent about what has happened, where money went, what happened to it in the past, but more importantly, figure out ways that we can leverage what we do have and build for a better financial future.
Sandra Morgan, Mayor-elect Cleveland Heights, thank you very much for joining us.
That's East Cleveland.
Oh, my goodness. I am so sorry. I have Cleveland Heights on the brain because we talked with Jim Petrus earlier. East Cleveland Mayor-elect Sandra Morgan, thank you so much.
Understood. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we will look at the results from some school levies and school board races as we recap yesterday's election results. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. Almost 60 Northeast Ohio school districts had levies on the ballot yesterday, including several that saw levies fail in this year's earlier May election. Now, the levy landscape has been an interesting one, as many property owners across Ohio have seen property taxes increase. This left some school districts wondering how voters would respond at the ballot box. There were also several school board races happening in Northeast Ohio, and IdeaStream's education reporter Connor Morris has been keeping an eye on all of these issues. He joins us now by phone. Connor, thank you for staying up late and waking up early to be with us today.
Of course, not a problem.
Now, if you would like to join the conversation, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org or send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Connor, school levies were a hot topic this year because of property taxes increasing in many communities. So give us a bit of context what many of the levies were up against at the ballot box.
Yeah, as you mentioned at the top of the show, we're seeing a lot of backlash in the state right now to property taxes. It's, property values reached basically record highs in recent years since the pandemic. That we've seen a statewide initiative looking to get on the ballot next year to abolish all property taxes, and legislators have been looking at ways to try to cut property taxes. We saw the legislature basically remove schools' abilities to put certain kinds of levies on the ballot as kind of a initial bid to kind of reduce the burden on folks. This election we saw, while the majority of school levy attempts in the region were successful, many of those were just renewals, and folks generally will support that. That's keeping, taxes at the same rate. But the folks that were looking for, the districts that were looking for increases in taxes, they had a really tough time. It was just, by my count, there were 17 districts in the region that were looking for tax increases, and only 3 of them were successful. And 2 of them were in Cuyahoga County, actually.
Well, Connor, let's talk about the different types of levies that were on the ballot. If you can give us sort of a high-level summary and how that played into how voters responded.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, renewals, those are less controversial. Generally, folks support those, but we did see some renewals fail, actually, and that's going to put some districts in kind of a tough spot. There were also bond issues, which were basically they go to fund construction projects, and those were not very successful. There was one out of like Vermilion Schools, for example, that was, again, that's successful. They tried to get in the spring and they failed. There are additional, which are basically operating levies to go fund operations, and those were not very successful overall. We've also seen a couple of things that like substitute levies, which are replacing an old levy at a slightly higher rate. And those were generally not successful. Those also were basically canceled by the legislature, so districts can't go for those anymore after this election cycle. And then also there were some income taxes actually. So some districts have been trying to. They say, "Hey, we hear you. Property taxes are too high. How about an income tax?" And unfortunately, those were all unsuccessful in the region. So.
Speaking of unsuccessful, Parma City Schools hasn't seen a new levy approved by the district since 2010, and it failed again last night. So what does that mean for Parma City Schools?
Yeah, this is something I've been covering since I came here to IdeaStream like 3 years ago, and even it's been going on even before that. They're probably going to have some tough decisions ahead. The district has said they've avoided layoffs up to this point, but that could change in the future. The district is looking like they're going to run out of cash by the end of the 2028-2029 school year. And that's based off of their forecast, basically. And they want to avoid that, of course. That means they're probably going to have to make some significant cuts in the meantime to push that off. They're really trying to avoid that. So, they're probably going to be back at the ballot again.
And let me ask you about other notable levies in Cuyahoga County. What happened elsewhere across the area?
Yeah, sure. So Shaker Heights, they had a really pretty big levy, 9.9 mil, which is quite a lot. Operating levy that actually passed. That was one of the few successes in the region, as I mentioned, in terms of new money being approved. And it was a little surprising. They just had another levy passed 2 years ago that was focused more on buildings and preschool. But yeah, they said that this one was meant to avoid cuts to operations and kind of stabilize things. South Euclid Lyndhurst also saw a levy that was successful, a new levy. And in Richmond Heights, they saw another levy failure. And they've had a couple attempts recently on that. So.
Let's look at Lorain County now. Elyria City School District had an attempt at a new levy, hoping to fund operations after its previous levy attempt failed. So what happened in Elyria, Connor?
Yeah, so Elyria and also Streetsboro, kind of on the other side of the city, also failed to get levies passed for a second time this year. They both tried in the spring, and just looks like again some of these suburbs especially are where property taxes have increased the most, and they do have higher levels of owner occupancy, and so residents I think in those areas and in Parma as well are especially wary of tax increases. But yeah, Elyria, like Parma, they've said, we're trying to avoid any layoffs. We've been trying to cut by attrition, which means, if there's an empty position, you just leave it empty, you don't fill it. And also, there were a couple other levies in Lorain County. Lorain and Oberlin schools passed, and Amherst and Vermilion, as I mentioned earlier, failed. And yeah, Vermilion is looking for this school bond to kind of modernize its school buildings. And we're seeing that across the region. Some districts just say our buildings are old. We really need, higher quality facilities. And so they look for a bond issue, which they do last for quite a while, these bond issues, about 37 years or so usually. So that is kind of a big ask for voters.
Let's talk about the school board races now. Who came out on top in the Akron Board of Election race?
Yeah, this is one we were watching closely for sure. So the four candidates who were elected in order of vote totals were Phil Montgomery, who's the director of finance for Summit County, Greg Harrison, who is an incumbent on the board, Kamaya Kelly, a newcomer. She's a mental health advocate and healthcare worker, and then Nathan Yaros, who works at an education-focused nonprofit. So, three of those are newcomers to the board. Notably, that list does not include board president Carla Jackson and then the former board president Diana Autry. They were not reelected. Jackson and Autry formed kind of a wing of the board that's had the majority in some controversial decisions lately. Basically, the same night that the board voted to get rid of its former superintendent Michael Robinson, he was accused of bullying staff. Those board members voted to put in current superintendent Mary Outley without a search, which was kind of controversial. Some of the other board members were saying, let's take our time with this. But regardless, with this election results, it's a bit of a shakeup on the board.
Let's talk about the Lakewood Board of Education now. What happened there, and what does that have to do with the bigger question that was happening in Lakewood about school consolidation?
Yeah, so in Lakewood, there were these newcomers, Monica Bruwall and Katie Slife-Rustad. They were facing off against the board president, Nora Katzenberger, and vice president Betsy Bergen-Shaughnessy. Bruwall and Rustad, who were the newcomers, they campaigned on reversing a recent controversial decision to consolidate the district's elementary schools, but they were unsuccessful. So the current board president and vice president were reelected. It was a pretty close race still, though, and it shows that many in Lakewood are still really upset with the idea of closing Lincoln Elementary as an elementary school and turning it into a preschool. So those new candidates kind of tapped into that. There was a nonprofit that was formed that actually did throw some support behind those newcomers as well. So interesting stuff over there for sure.
And in Menor, School Board President Maggie Cook won re-election. So what do we need to be paying attention to there?
Yeah, so school board races are nonpartisan, but there was essentially a more conservative team of opponents to Cook there. They're called Team ISO. They wanted to focus on culture war issues, some might call them. On their website, they said they wanted to get rid of books they saw as controversial that are in the school library. They kind of chastised the district for an inclusive bathroom policy that it has gotten rid of to speak for the district there. But generally speaking, Menor's Board of Education meetings appeared to sometimes be overtaken by residents kind of complaining about these culture war issues, so to speak. And one of those Team ISO candidates was very close. It was just 5, 6, 7 votes or so, closest to the third highest vote getter. So there were 3 open seats. They did not get in, at least it appears, so it does show that there's some division in the community there, that these folks did get a significant amount of support. But we'll watch and see if anything changes, if they do a recount or anything else like that as well, since the vote was so close there.
Good point. These results do still have to be certified. And Connor, we know that Election Day is just the beginning of these stories. So as you look ahead now, can you tell us what you'll be covering moving forward or what you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, we're really going to be keeping a close eye on school funding issues and, this kind of roiling discontent with property taxes. That will be a huge story next year if the folks end up getting, property taxes abolished. How will you fund schools, but also like police and libraries and everything else, And just a quick plug for what I'm working on tonight as well. We're going to be covering Cleveland School Board tonight, and a decision could be announced on school closures and consolidations. So I just would love for folks to keep an eye out for some news later on that front.
Thank you, Connor. We'll be sure to keep an eye out for that. Connor Morris, education reporter here at IdeaStream Public Media. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye there. You can find coverage from all of our reporters on Northeast Ohio's races on our website, ideastream.org, so make sure you check that out as things continue to develop. And it's time now to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll look at broader political news and look at what's ahead for the next year in politics. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. The 2025 November general election results have yet to be certified, but for many, attention has already shifted to next year's midterm elections. Really, that's been a topic of discussion for months already. Now, unlike this year, the ballot in 2026 will include races for the U.S. House and Senate and statewide executive offices, including the governor's seat. We may even see a measure attempting to end property taxes completely in Ohio. So let's indulge that conversation now and look ahead to 2026 to see what, if anything, results from this year's election may mean for the coming political year. Joining me by phone from Akron, we have Dr. David Cohen. He's a professor of political science and the director of applied politics program at the University of Akron. Welcome, Dr. Cohen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And calling in from Columbus, we have Ohio Public Radio State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Karen, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation, if you want to ask a question or weigh in with your thoughts about politics, you can give us a call. That number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Dave, I'll ask you, what were some of the main results that you were watching from around the country last night, including Zohran Mamdani's win for the mayor of New York City?
Yeah, it was it was a clean sweep by the Democrats last night. It sent a chilling message to the Republicans. At the beginning of the day, there's a lot of speculation that maybe Republicans would be able to flip the governor's seats in New Jersey, that maybe the New York mayor's race might be closer. And at the end of the day, not only did the Democrats win every single one of those offices, but down tickets. What happened in Virginia, flipping a number of Republican seats in the state legislature, and kind of solidifying and finalizing the Democrats' takeover of the southern state of Virginia, which would have been incomprehensible a couple of decades ago. I think sent a real message. Prop 50 passing in California. There was talk a couple of weeks ago that, boy, the polls are way closer than expected. It was a complete blowout. And when I went to bed last night, it was they were winning almost 2/3 of the vote for that Prop 50, which is the redistricting referendum. And so I think Democrats extremely happy about the results. Republicans not so much, and we saw that President Trump went on Truth Social and said a few things about last night that he was not happy about.
What do you think of the voter turnout for the mayor of New York race? It was the highest voter turnout since 1969, and Mamdani won there with 51.5% of the vote. Does that say anything we need to be paying attention to?
Absolutely. It was crazy, the turnout in New York City. The fact that the turnout was higher than what you see in a presidential election says everything. Young people, younger generations, very excited about Mamdani's candidacy. He won over 50% of the vote in a 3-person race. And so, it was a no doubt victory, a lot of enthusiasm. And what you're going to see is, and what you've already seen, Democratic candidates essentially borrowing from Mamdani's affordability message and his targeting of working class economic issues is something that is a winning message. It was the same message seen in New Jersey, same message seen in Virginia by the Democratic gubernatorial candidates as well.
And Dave, gerrymandering and redistricting has been a big conversation in many states in the country. Now, with California's redistricting measure on the ballot and that passing, does that mean anything for the rest of the country going into 2026?
Well, it means that Democrats have a much better shot at taking over the House, because this was an offset of the efforts in Texas and other Republican states that were directed by President Trump to redraw their maps mid-decade, which never happens. It happened in Ohio because of the law in Ohio. But in general, states never redraw their districts in the middle of the decade. Texas decided to do it. They essentially added 5 Republican-leaning districts, and the people in California felt it was necessary to offset that. You're going to see actions in Virginia and potentially Illinois and Maryland, other democratically held states, to further offset the efforts that are happening, not only in Texas, but also Ohio, potentially Indiana, Missouri, and some other places. And Karen can attest to this. I've been talking about redistricting and gerrymandering literally for decades and what an abomination it is. But right now we are seeing an arms race with regards to gerrymandering, and both parties are engaging in it, and I don't really see an end to this process.
Karen, I'll bring you into the conversation now. Ohio just passed new maps that will be in effect here shortly. So does what happened in California have any impact here in Ohio?
No, but I think the results overall could. I mean, it's certainly looking, and again, this is the day after, so obviously a lot can change between now and the election next year. It's looking a lot more like the decision to compromise on a map, which is what the Democrats on the Ohio Redistricting Commission did, and agree to that map, a bipartisan map, is starting to look a little bit better, I think, for some than it may have looked a week ago, because the whole deal of that map was that Republican strength was increased in the Toledo area and the Cincinnati area, and that's Marcy Kaptur's district.
I think we may have lost Karen there. Yeah, so we're going to go back to David now. Hopefully we can get Karen to reconnect so we can continue that conversation about the new maps here in Ohio. Dave, I want to ask you, midterm elections are typically seen as a referendum on the party in power. With control of the presidency and Congress, Republicans have understandably had momentum since President Donald Trump took office again in January. Now, yesterday was not a midterm election, but do any of the results from yesterday's election change the energy in Washington, D.C. right now?
Well, I think it increases the panic level among Republicans because midterm elections are, yes, they are a referendum on the party in power, and it's usually a negative. And in fact, the president's party, regardless of which party it is, regardless of the president, loses seats in the House of Representatives. It's only not happened a couple of times in the last 100 years, and that was, I believe, 1998 and 2002. The president's party always loses seats, and they usually lose seats in the U.S. Senate as well. It's never good for the president's party in a midterm election, especially, and it's what social scientists look at, if the economy is not doing well and if the president is not popular. Well, we have an extremely unpopular president right now who's under 40% approval, and we have an economy that is not doing well at all. If you look at GDP, if you look at inflation and cost of living, those indicators show an economy that's in bad shape. If you're a wealthy person and you have a lot of money invested in the stock market, things are great. But for most people on planet Earth, the American economy is not doing well. So that portends a lot of pain for Republicans come 2026. And if the Democrats were in charge and they had the presidency, it would be bad for them. It's not a partisan thing. It's just simply what happens in the life cycle of a presidency.
We do have Karen back now. So, Karen, I want to go back to that conversation we were having. Thank you for calling back in. Technology, right? We love it.
Exactly.
So, going back to the new Ohio district maps, it was with bipartisan support, but the map does skew more red. But Kyle Kondict of Sabatos Crystal Ball, who has been on the show before, thinks Democrats ended up with a better map than expected. Do you agree?
And that's kind of what I was saying there when I got dropped there. My phone dropped me here. The map is based on last night's results, and again, it's a lot could change in a year. It's starting to look like while those two districts in the Toledo and Cincinnati area are tipped more toward Republicans, they may not go to Republicans. And Marcy Kaptur and Greg Landsman have campaigned and run well in Republican-leaning climates, and so it's not a done deal that this is a 12-3 map. And I think that you heard Republicans and Democrats both saying that, even though it was clear that the map really tipped those two districts more toward Republicans and tipped the Akron area district represented by Emilia Sykes more toward Democrats. So I think we still have to wait and see. Kyle, I think, has done some ratings on this, but I still think that there's a long way to go before next year's vote.
And speaking of long way to go, we really don't know how much longer we have to go in this government shutdown. Dave, I'll ask this question about you. Right now, which party is impacted more, and will the shutdown have an impact on voters a year from now, or will short-term memory kick in and will it just be completely forgotten?
Well, let me start with your second part of your question. Americans tend to have very short memories, and I don't think a year from now people are really going to remember it unless they were personally impacted by this. If they were an air traffic controller, for example, that's not getting paid and being forced to work, or somebody that's been furloughed, they may remember this and not in a good way. But for most people, they probably will not remember the shutdown, provided that it ends fairly quickly. I would be shocked if it went past Thanksgiving at this point. But I think in terms of who is suffering politically from this, I think the polling is showing pretty clearly the Republican Party and Donald Trump are getting more of the blame than the Democrats are. And we'll just see how this thing ends and what the results are and what Democrats get out of the deal.
We have a call now from Curtis in Menor. Curtis, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi. So earlier you said that in Ohio there's people trying to put a measure on the bill to abolish property taxes in Ohio, and I can't even fathom how that would work. I mean, how would anything get done, especially given the way we're currently funding schools?
I can address that.
Go ahead, Karen.
I spoke to one of the organizers, and this is an all-volunteer effort. This is not backed by a political party, but it's an all-volunteer effort to gather 414,000 signatures by next July. And that's valid signatures, so you got to gather more than that. And I've said it before, I don't think I've ever seen an all-volunteer effort to try to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot succeed, but this could be the time. When I specifically asked that question of if you get rid of all property taxes, then how do you fund schools and law enforcement and libraries and zoos and all the things that property taxes do support? One of the organizers told me, well, that's not our problem. That's what the legislature would have to do. And so now there's some reporting that say if you get rid of all the income tax, state income tax, and all property tax, you blow property tax alone is $16.7 billion that's collected in the state. And so to get rid of both of those things, you'd have a statewide sales tax of like 20%. So that's the kind of trade-offs that would have to happen here. And the legislature is doing some moves now to change property tax law. And I think that's been interesting to watch. But certainly voters are frustrated with property taxes. But yesterday, 2/3 of school levies passed statewide. So they are still voting for them.
Speaking of money, Karen, we do know that the 2026 races will be expensive. We are already seeing that in the Senate matchup between sitting Senator John Husted and former Senator running again, Sherrod Brown. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, this was going to be an expensive race no matter what. Obviously, Sherrod Brown getting back into the race to try to get back to the Senate really energized national Democrats who say, they're not only going to be putting money certainly into that race, but also they've made an investment in the Ohio Democratic Party now to try to build up some messaging and infrastructure to be prepared for next year. They actually announced that a couple weeks ago. My colleague Joe Ingles was reporting on that. So there's money there. You've got a ton of money that's going to come in on this, especially now, again, looking at last night's vote. There are certainly folks who are going to think that John Husted is vulnerable, that Sherrod Brown has a better shot based on what happened yesterday. And that, of course, will just drive the price tag up. So the idea that the Ohio Senate race could be competitive means that there's a lot of money potentially coming.
Dave, I'll ask you, voter turnout was pretty low in this election here in Ohio. What do we expect that to look like in 2026? Obviously, statewide measures on the ballot will make a difference there. But in terms of younger voters, do we see anything happening with the parties that we expect to engage younger voters more?
Well, I think the fact that it's going to be a midterm election and that there are so many crucial offices on the ballot will drive turnout. You'll have a governor's race. You'll have every statewide position will be up, from Secretary of State to auditor. You have a U.S. Senate race now, and you'll also have key House races, especially in the 9th Congressional District and in the 1st Congressional District. And so I think just based on the fact that there are these high-profile races, which will have national implications, if we're talking about the U.S. Senate race, I think turnout's going to be very, very high. And plus, especially I would say on the Democratic side, the reason going back to midterm elections that the president's party often struggles in a midterm election is that enthusiasm has gone away, usually for the party in power, and it's the people that are angry about the direction of things that motivates them to get out and to vote. And so I think we're going to have a very high turnout next year.
And Dave, I'll ask you, as a political scientist, aside from voter turnout, is there anything that you'll be watching as we move into 2026, into next year's midterm election?
I think in terms of Ohio, one of the key questions is what is going to happen in the governor's race on the Democratic side. Right now, Amy Acton is in the race. She had been the presumptive nominee. She had received a lot of endorsements on the Democratic side. But there is, I think, legitimate speculation that former Congressman Tim Ryan is going to jump into the race and challenge her on the Democratic side. And if that happens, there's going to be major implications because that's going to be a pretty bitter primary. process to get through.
Karen, what are you seeing very quickly? Are you hearing rumblings around the State House about something like that happening?
I think Dave's absolutely right about Tim Ryan. I think you're going to see something on that in the next couple of weeks. I think that there's a thought that what happened last night gives him a better shot at that. So I think that that's something that we're going to be looking at. Democrats still, though, need to pick a candidate for auditor and treasurer because they don't have one for the statewide ballot yet.
All right. Thank you very much, Karen Kassler at our State House News Bureau. We appreciate your time. Also, Dr. Dave Cohen from the University of Akron. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Great being on. Thanks.